Hi, I'm Mark Anthony Tierno, author of Maldine, Cyberdawn, and Spectre Flatfoot, and I'm here with another writing tip. Today I'm going to talk about the four elements. Now, sometimes writing a good story can be a bit like alchemy. You need the right mix of things to churn out a truly great story. Problem is, what are the basic ingredients? The alchemists of old, for instance, they had air, earth, fire, and water. So what do writers have? They have their own four elements as well. Descriptive prose, dialogue, character development, and of course plot. Each has its own importance. Now, descriptive prose is what makes your world come alive. The ability to make uh, the reader feel the world, believe it as if it's as real as the one he's living in right now. Um, and key to that is something akin to what Johnny Carson used to say about comedy. He used to say, "By the setup, by the bit," and it's like that. If you have to set up your world in enough of the right detail that it feels real. Um, Except you have to strike a balance, put enough details to make it realistic and as alive as possible, but without weighing it down too heavily. Because there have been many stories that have been ruined by too much detail and not nearly enough action. For myself, I tend to go with a bit of a poetic bent, just a little flowery, while carefully crafting very specific details in the wording. And when an event happens, say someone getting killed, a major revelation, hero coming to the rescue, that sort of thing. In the movies, the cue there would be by the dramatic music happening. Well, you don't have that. So what you have to do is uh, arrange the wording so that the reader can feel the impact of the moment, just as if there's a big dramatic musical cue coming on. You have to be able to make the reader stand and cheer where appropriate, laugh or cry, sit at the edge of his seat. That's what good descriptive prose can get you. Second element is dialogue. Now I'm talking dialogue where it sounds like real actual people are conversing. Mark Twain had a few lines to say about that. I forget the exact wording, but something like if the guy starts off with a given accent in the story, he better end up with the same accent. My take is not everyone comes from Yale or Harvard. No one has perfect English, and they don't all have the same cultural background. So, if in doubt, take your dialogue and read it out loud. Does it sound stiff and forced? Does it sound like an actual person from that time and culture is talking? Um, does it sound like something, say, the last time you and your friend spoke? Um, or do some of the characters work in a couple of quick one-liners, even in dire circumstances? That's what happens. Do they sound like they'd all pal around together? Or do they sound like, everyone just walked off of out of Yale or Harvard, no one uses contractions, that sort of thing. And a dialogue that is also one of the minor points. It's a small, subtle one, but look in on the next time, some dialogue and you aren't quite sure what's wrong. Does anyone use contractions? In real life, people use contractions all the time. Sometimes in a novel, though, depending who wrote it, you won't find a single contraction. Um, in fact, I use that a lot. There's one specific character in Maldine, Charles Borch, Where specifically, I do the whole Kwai Chang Kang approach with him. He doesn't use contractions. And that's a very subtle way of getting him to stand out because everyone else does. So does the dialogue sound like the way a real life bad guy would talk? And also remember, no bad guy is ever going to say, "I'm the bad guy, you're the good guy." For one thing, bad guys just about never think of themselves um, as the bad guy. They view themselves as either being better than anyone else, more deserving, or perhaps just thinking the rest are fools to be used. But they never view themselves as evil and should never talk that way. Just keep the dialogue real, even if it means violating a few dozen grammatical laws to do so, especially if it does. One of my Flatfoot stories, I have a character who has a severe lisp. So every S he has sounds like a TH. So I'd go through his dialogue first, writing it normally, and then I'd go back through and substitute a TH for every S. And when after I was finished for the day, I'd run the spell checker. That thing lit up like a pinball machine. But I kept it in. and then also rules of grammar. No one in real life, people very rarely follow half your grammatical rules. And if you're writing down in dialogue, you should keep that in mind. In fact, one of my other tips on my top 10 tip is turn off the grammar checker. Having the spell checker on is okay, but keep the grammar checker off. That's good for textbook papers and things like that. But for a story, you got two possibilities: dialogue, which shouldn't necessarily follow strict grammar, and descriptive prose, which, as I said earlier, I use a poetic feel, and there are certain poetic elements that don't follow strict grammatical rules, but they work. So keep the grammar checker off and doing your dialogue. Next is character development. All stories have characters, obviously. They're the ones that carry out your plot. So just as your world must be believable within its own context, so too must the characters be. They have to look, feel, and speak like actual real people. In the case of aliens or fantasy creatures, with non-human psychologies and different cultural backgrounds, all you have to do is keep it self-consistent within its own context. However you set them up to be for how their culture and mindset views things, keep it consistent and draw their characterizations from there. All your characters must seem like people, be it human, elf, dwarf, Vulcan, whatever. Sometimes all it takes is a line or two to establish them, but you need to put it there. This harks back in part to the previous mention about dialogue. Certain characters will talk in a certain way, and that will keep their characterization going. Another character I have in the Muldoon series, for instance, is Blogok. He can't string 4 words together in the same sentence. That's his limit. And he leaves out a lot of things of what people would call normal, like adjectives and verbs and stuff, and tends to speak very basically. So I can have a scene where there's a line of dialogue spoken the way he would, without saying who it was, and the reader would know who it was. That's the sort of real life characterization you need to have. And finally, plot. That's what it's all about. You can have the best character-driven story around, but unless there's a plot with a beginning, middle, end, and all all the stuff in between, no one's going to be staying around too long to read it. Story has to be about something. It has to be going somewhere, but it doesn't have to be a strictly a linear plot either. Twists, turns, unexpected developments. As long as you have your whys and wherefores, out in order and everything mapped out, so you know what's going on, then you can make your plot dance, sing, and do backflips. But remember, uh, um, and this is where excessive note taking comes in handy. Keep track of everything and have a reason for everything that happens. The characters may not always know up front why it's happening. In fact, most of the time they actually shouldn't. Sometimes, what the reason why something's happening is part of the quest of something they have to find out. At the very least, you as the author should know exactly why everything's happening, and what all the reasons are, and keep it consistent. Um, it could, like I said, it could often. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn off the emailer. What was it? If it's a reason that the characters or the readers, don't yet know, but they can at least figure out, given what's known, um, then you have to have it there. Not everything happens out of pure arbitrariness or a random encounter. If the reader has to ask why, then it's your duty to give them an answer sooner or later. There's a movie that came out several years ago by Robert Altman, Gosford Park, which is an example of what happens when you go all character development and no plot. That thing was 2.5 hours. It was advertised. It looked like an Agatha Christie murder mystery, so I was, hopeful for a period piece murder thing. The murder happened an hour and a half in. The rest of the time, I wanted to claw my eyeballs out because there was nothing happening, just all about the whole upstairs, downstairs, servants versus the upper crust class thing going on, and half the dialogue took place while the servants were polishing the silverware. By the time the murder came around, I was really hoping it'd be the director, Robert Altman. And then the plot was carried out. It was obvious that it got squeegeed in. And apparently, from what I hear, they realized midway through the shooting, hey, we need a plot here. Let's have a murder. So, no, that's not the way to go. And in fact, there's many debates when is plot more important than characters. That's a ridiculous question because they're both just as important. You need the plot. The story has to go somewhere, and the characters are the one that carry it. So that's my word on that. So you have your 4 elements: descriptive prose, dialogue, character development, and plot. Each is just as important as the other. So now that you have these 4 elements, it's time to put them to practice. Which ones are you good at? Which ones do you need to improve upon? You know, for me, pretty much all 4 come just as easily, but that's me. Best way to practice at getting better at them is start reading a few books. If there's a book that has some good snappy dialogue or something, read up on that if you're weak in dialogue. If you're weak on descriptive prose, find a couple good books that are good for that. Once you get all 4 kicking in a high gear, though, you can make anything sound like an epic adventure. And I don't just say this lightly. Maldine, for instance, obviously, that's, the first book is 330,000 words alone, and it's a 13-book series. That's an epic adventure. But my Inspector Flatfoot series, the first one, Project Looking Glass, is only 6,000 words. But the way I have it there, it sounds like its own miniature epic, with all the loops and everything he goes through, and because it follows all the 4 basic elements. So get good at your 4 elements, and you'll be able to have an epic every time you write something. This has been Mark Anthony Tierno, and get back to reading.